Greetings and welcome to the Mount Rushmore podcast. We're finally doing this, you guys. We've been putting it off for so long. I'm Jeff, my good friends Richard
Hello.
and Michael.
Howdy.
We wait until the last minute. We say we're going to do it in the future. When we finally get together and do a podcast recording, we always pick a nutty topic. And this week, you may have guessed the topic is procrastination. I chose it. I chose this one.
Yes, you did. Why
Yeah.
K-Fi?
Because I'm 53 years old and I still think I'm going to be the hottest young thing in in my field of endeavor of creative excellence or whatever. And somehow I've put that off for 45 years. But I'm actually fascinated with the psychology that behind upon which people decide to do a thing and then they don't do it, and this idea behind what perception we temporal creatures with a shelf life, because we do. Yeah.
What?
When we don't carpe diem. What's the opposite?
Carpe undiem.
Carpe undiem. And we have this perception that that there is going to be infinite tomorrows, and we'll do that thing that we really feel in our heart that is our work that we should do, and we put it off. So procrastination. I am going to ask Michael to get us started.
Okay, well, I'm going to move one of my choices up to the top since you kind of highlighted something that I think is interesting.
Oh.
My first choice is a character named Hob Gadling from the comic book series The Sandman.
Oh, cool.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Soon to be a Netflix television series. So
Oh.
if you're
Oh, it's going to be amazing. I'm really looking forward to that.
if you've never heard of The Sandman, go check it out as a
He
comic
was
book first, and then
an
go check it out.
ECW wrestler. He used to drink a lot of beer and different Sandman.
Spider-Man No Way
Different
Home.
Sandman.
Is this a Neil
That's
Gaiman
right.
thing?
Yeah, Neil Gaiman story. And so Hob Gadling is a character that the Sandman, who's basically this kind of infinitely long living character who's existed since basically the beginning of time, encounters in the mid 15th century at some sort of pub where he was traveling with his sister Death. And they run into this guy who's basically decided that death isn't anything that is all that important, and he calls it a mug's game, and he's decided that he's not going to die. And so Sandman and his sister kind of make a little wager, and she kind of casts a little magic spell, and biddly boo, 100 years later, he says, I'll meet you, or he says to the character, I'll meet you here in 100 years if you've still kind of not given it up. If you still want to live, just meet me here in 100 years. And the story progresses, so he meets him like over this course of like 500 years. And it's this idea that he keeps putting off death, even though he's kind of suffered this really traumatic life of basically starving for 70 years of it, of kind of dealing with the ins and outs of kind of the moral issues regarding slavery, and just having both these like horrible times and great times and kind of middling times, and how he's still kind of feels this no pressure to kind of give into death, and keeps kind of procrastinating on dying and pushing it off. And I just thought, boy, Jeff, you really keyed into it right away. Just the idea of like, well, I'm not going to die, so I can just do whatever I'm going to do later. There's no big deal. I'm not going to die, then whatever. And maybe it's like a young man's game of I'll get to it eventually, because what do I got to do? But
yeah,
I don't know.
that's an interesting theme. In is this sorry, I've known of Neil Gaiman for decades, but I've been procrastinating and actually reading his work. Is this a graphic novel? Is this
the first or the initial iteration of Sandman has been like as a graphic novel, like kind of monthly comics that were eventually collected into like trade paperbacks or graphic novels or whatever. So yeah, they've kind of come out, they used to come out monthly starting around 1987 or so, and they ran for 75 issues.
Yeah.
But his stuff is all kind of steeped in like lore and history, and he's very writerly. And we were joking about Shakespeare before we started um, recording, and Shakespeare and
Yeah.
mythology, and he writes in the way that it feels like he's read every book, so you don't kind of have
Hmm.
to.
Yeah.
Speaking
He's
about
got a
procrastinating,
classical foundation.
yeah,
Do you,
he just it's just also built into everything.
it's funny that what you procrastination seems to be one's attempt to control um, the timeline and the pace at which you do accomplish things over this timeline. And it struck me that as a you claimed a young person's game. As a young person, I remember time was this commodity that was just overwhelming, crushing. There was so much time before you got to be an adult and to do the cool stuff that you really wanted to do. And I, as somewhat of an indoor kid who related more with adults than my peers and didn't want to do gym class and didn't want to do school, time was just this thing that I just couldn't wait to get rid of. And my perception was that there was so much of it that I had to wade through before my life really began. And now I'm looking back and just wish that I had all those years back. So
Mm.
I do find it interesting because you wonder, why do people procrastinate? And I've heard some psychological um, kind of observations about the idea of taking over, kind of claiming authority over yourself and doing things on your own time. But oh my God, as a kid, I remember time just wouldn't go away. There was just so much of it.
Right.
All right.
No, it is. I mean, it's true. As you get older, that idea of I can push something off till tomorrow or a week from now or a month from now
Yeah.
becomes more oppressive.
Yeah.
It just doesn't. You start to realize, wait a second, I don't have that many. Not to be morbid, but I don't have that many more tomorrows, relatively speaking,
Oh yeah.
versus I did when I was a kid or when I was a young adult.
Uh-huh. Okay, Richard, what's your first choice?
All right, so my first choice is George R. Martin,
Great.
the writer of the Game of Thrones series, along with some countless other fantasy stories. And this whole Song of Ice and Fire, which is what Game of Thrones is based off of. The Winds of Winter, people have been waiting 11 years for him to publish the latest edition of this series. And every 6 months or so, you'll get like, oh, I've finished another chapter, or some sort of like some leaking of a few pages that'll come out, and people get excited. Okay, maybe this is it. Maybe this is going to start coming out soon. And it's just like, fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, shame on you. Is that the phrase, or is it the other way around? I can never. Is that right?
I think once bitten, twice shy.
Yeah,
No,
that's
yeah.
a good
Yeah,
way to
no,
put it.
no. Fool me twice. Shame on us who expect he's actually going to put out this book, right?
Yeah, exactly. After a while, it's just, folks, we just need to come to the realization this book's not coming out.
And he's
Like,
got another one to go
ever.
after it.
Yeah. I mean, not just Winds of Winter, but then there's a Dance, or no. What's the? I'm trying to think what the last one is supposed to be
A
called.
Dream of Spring.
A Dream of Spring. Thank you.
Well, the funny
Yeah,
thing about
he's
him
got 2 books left to go.
is it's he might be procrastinating on finishing this aspect of the series, but it's not like he's hasn't been working like constantly on like. So it's
Yes,
such a weird sense of procrastination. He's not lazy. He's just like he keeps getting distracted and wanting to write other things about this world that he's created. It, it's but at the same time, it's like the thing that people are most like. Okay, why don't you write this thing, and then afterwards you can kind of fill in your world of stuff that happened, 800 years ago. And it's like, well, I don't know. This is what I kind of want to write right now.
it would
The
be
book
as
is
it
very
would be.
interesting.
Yeah, it would be as if George Lucas made Star Wars and Empire, and then decided, yeah, we should make Clone Wars now. And then
Yeah, I'm
after
gonna go.
that,
I'm gonna go back and talk about this little green frog guy for a little bit.
yeah, it would be like if all of the other stuff came out and Return of the Jedi was just sitting out there waiting to be made. That's what it's like. it just, like you said, Michael, he's got all of these other projects that he's been working on, whether they're Game of Thrones related or whether they're other projects based off of other properties that he's created over the years, of the various TV shows that he's executive producing and helping to write. And it is that feeling of like having a big work project and knowing this is the thing you need to be focusing it on, but just being so overwhelmed by all the work you need to do on it that it's easier just to do these little side projects.
Yeah.
It's just, it's amazing to me that collectively, does he not have an editor? Is there not someone there who can like wave a contract at him and say,
Yeah.
yeah, it's time?
I always feel like Stephen King's got about 20 people kind of dressed, sitting there up in Maine with him, just kind of ready to type out whatever he says.
Yeah,
And
it's the exact opposite. Maybe they need to maybe Stephen King just needs to pay a visit to George R. Martin and kind of like light a fire under his ass.
Well, that's interesting to me. For me, fear is a component of procrastination, and I would also I would imagine that with great success, one might, I don't know, lose their imposter syndrome. If George R. R. Martin somehow thought that he's going to be found a fraud, he's gonna sell a billion copies of that book before anybody ever reads it. So at least he's going to go out big. But do you
Right.
think it's imposter syndrome? Do you think he's afraid of flopping? And didn't didn't they make all those? Didn't they pass his books in the Game of Thrones TV show?
Yes, they did.
Yeah. Okay.
And we all know how well that ending was
Yeah.
taken by the fans. So maybe that's part of it. Maybe he's afraid that he's going to get the same amount of shit as the TV show runners did when they tried to bring it to a conclusion. I'm reading a Ringer article right now that's from uh, April 2021 by Ben Lindbergh. And one of his things that he posits is that it's not so much that he's procrastinating, it's that he has trouble saying no to anything.
Oh.
And so he just keeps, anytime there's a new project, he goes, oh, that sounds good to me. Well, maybe I'll help work on that. And he just kind of keeps doing all of these, saying yes to all these ancillary projects. And it just keeps taking his focus away from the thing he really should be focusing on.
One thing that I relate with in regards to content creators is you often start with a germ of an idea and you socialize it with your community and say, wouldn't it be great if I, an architect, did a building that looked like this and it was this tall and it was this big, and everybody around you says, yeah, that's great. Well, 90% of the accolades you want, you already got just by communicating that thing. Like as a storyteller, sometimes I'll joke with somebody in a bar about this idea for a story. I had this idea. Okay, it's called Stripper Flight. A plane load of strippers going from LA to Vegas, like it's hijacked, and the strippers have to defeat the hijackers
Oh.
to land successfully.
There is a glass stiletto heel that is going through somebody's
Yeah,
terrorist eyeball.
yeah, it's something. It's evocative. I've
Have
told I've
now
told
now
that
that you've got this now that you've got this idea out in the world, you need to mail yourself a copy of this
That's
podcast
right.
so that it can be copyrighted. Anyway, go ahead.
Every time I tell that idea, people go, "Hey, I should do that." That's all I needed to hear. I'm never going to write that damn script. Okay, Michael, what's your second?
Okay, my second choice. It's going to be a personal story. I was in the 5th grade, and at the end of the year, or somewhere near the end of the year, there was like a big report due, and for the life of me, I cannot remember what it was about. But a big report was due, and uh, it got to a point where it was due the next day, and I had done zero work on it. Like, this is
Oh
one of those
no.
things you're supposed to like study for and research over like months, and like write things up and paste things on boards and things, and I did like just nothing. And so the night before, I thought, well, I'm going to stick my feet out the window and try to catch a cold. And I tried it, and guess what doesn't make you catch a cold is putting your feet like next to the window one night. And your parents come in, they try to see what's happening the next morning, and then you're just like totally normal and not don't have a fever. You
Oh,
can't give yourself a fever. And I remember going into class the next day thinking that, well, one, thinking I wouldn't be there, but then also like having this, just being totally mortified and having to like stand up in front of the class. And the teacher made me like tell him that I didn't do anything. And of course,
Oh God.
yeah, parents got called in. But it's just that feeling that like at some point you think you're just going to beat the system in some way by putting it off, that you can feel like procrastinating and just doing it, and you can get it all in if you just had one more. It's that if I just had one more day, I could knock this out. I'm sure if it was like a Thursday, I thought, you know what? If I just stay home Thursday, not that I could, not that I had any resources to do any of this research. I don't know whether I was like writing a report on, Eli Whitney's cotton gin, or some sort of study on like the, you know, African savannah, or who knows what it was. It must have been, it's a fifth grade. Those are the two things that you do reports on. But it was like, boy, I really thought that if I just strung it out one more day and if I could pull off an all day thing, I would be fine. And then it just kind of bit me in the ass.
Wow.
right in the tuchus.
Wow.
To be 11 and think that you can
Mhm.
outsmart um, your teacher and your parents and
Did you,
sickness as a concept.
did you attempt any sort of like type
Of course,
thing?
I tried like to make my head sweaty and tried to, my cheeks red, but you know, I'm no Ferris Bueller. Let's just say
Michael, I think
I didn't have a synthesizer that I could I think I could fake it
were
with.
you off? I feel like you were a kid who was a read them too, or read yourself like Roald Dahl books, or books that uh, focused on a precocious young man who, through his own cleverness, got his way or skirted around the rules, or
Mm. Yes, I'm chock a block full of Roald Dahl stories.
okay,
So yeah, I at some point, charm only goes so far.
yeah,
You actually have
yeah,
to hand in this, the
yeah.
blank folder in the report.
I did that. Oh my god, I did that, and I almost felt like it was even a way of. I did that with plays where I would not learn my lines at all for the play. And then it came to the show, and I would just go on stage and make shit up uh, until they just lowered the curtain because, like,
Oh my god.
all the other actors were looking at me like, "Are you insane? Why did you
You know,
just learn the lines to the Odd Couple?"
maybe this speaks to it too. It feels like something pulled out of like The Simpsons, a Bart Simpson thing, or it might even be like a Calvin from Calvin and Hobbes thing, where like he handed in a report like that was just in a nice like plastic folder,
Mhm.
with like a
Yeah.
nice with like a nice cover on top, as if that's gonna win a bunch of points. That, well, that's 30% of the grade right there is just the
Yeah.
clear plastic,
Presentation.
with the brads through it, and it looks good. Okay. I've got
The
myself up to a C minus just on that alone, and then the rest of it, just smile.
one
Good
thing I
timing.
I have read about procrastination, and this is specifically a book for screenwriters, which I think it could apply to any kind of adult artistic endeavor, is that as young people, we begin to do work because we are told to. It is assigned to us, and we
Mm,
are a disciplinarian is holding us to that task. And there's a time after you graduate where you decide, I want to be a brilliant screenwriter or a sculptor or a painter or something. And you are you, it's up to you. But there's still that sense of authority. Like, you're not the boss of me, that you
mm,
have, that maybe inhabits your laptop or sits in your mouse or sits in your sculpting, painting tools. And that the best thing you can do is just sit there for an hour and not write, not paint, not sculpt, because you feel how stupid it is to sit there. How you are now empowered to do whatever you want to. It's on your own time. You are in charge of your destiny. So stop screwing yourself, you idiot. Richard, stop screwing yourself. Give me your second one.
Oh, I have the camera on, don't I?
He's screwing himself.
Oh boy.
Oh, yeah.
My second choice is the famous architect Frank Lloyd Wright, who
Oh,
was
wow.
a procrastinator in a very specific way that I think all of us can kind of relate to.
Oh.
He was hired on in the early 30s by a wealthy Pittsburgh businessman named Edgar Kaufman, who commissioned him to create a house called Falling Water out in I think middle Pennsylvania, the rural areas of Pennsylvania. And in November of 34, Wright goes out to the site, writes Kaufman and says, I've been working on the plans, but I haven't actually drawn anything up yet. Which is, by the way, is the equivalent of telling your boss, yeah, I've been ideating on it. If this was modern times, that's exactly what Frank Lloyd Wright would have said. So about 8 months goes by. Now he hasn't done any more work on it. Kaufman picks up the phone one day on a Sunday morning and calls him up and says, hey, guess what? I'm going to be coming by your house this afternoon. Why don't we get lunch and you can show me what the design looked like? He's got about 4 hours now.
Oh, wow.
To try and figure out what to do. Now, if this is you or I, our first thought would be, what excuse can I make? Or if it was me, my design for the house would be like an 8-year-old or six-year-old. Yeah, 4 sides. It looks like a square, and then it's got the little like 2 lines on the top for the roof and a little chimney coming out. That's what it would look like. No, this is Frank.
Curly curse smoke and that smiling sun happy face.
Yes, and I would have said, "Hip, here's your design. Doesn't it look great?" So apparently, Wright just finished his breakfast and had a couple of apprentices looking on. And within 4 hours, by the time Kaufman got up from Pittsburgh, he had finished the designs for this house, Falling Water, which wound up becoming his possibly most famous design. Mm. It's a National Historic Landmark, and it's listed among Smithsonian's life list of 28 places to visit before you die.
Wow.
So sometimes, I guess some people, there are people who say, I work better under pressure. And that's kind of why I wait until the last minute. Because my best thoughts don't start flowing until I get really up against it. And most of the time, I think that's just bullshit. That's just an excuse. That's something that people tell themselves to justify the fact that they're procrastinators. But apparently with Frank Lloyd Wright, it worked for him. Oh. So, far be it from me to criticize Frank Lloyd Wright for his architecture, no matter what it took to get it done.
Yeah.
2 hours it took him to make the drawings of this, beautiful, one of a kind dream home.
What I find interesting about that story is the perception of how the creative process works and time and its role in it. Like, oh, more time equals more creativity. Tell that to the Miles Davis quintet,
right?
When they're improvising, or they have each have one page with 5 chords on it, and we're going to record all of Kind of Blue with that.
Right.
It's, if you gave them more time, it would not have been more better. They took the exact amount of time to do that, and maybe these masters have become such phenomenal understanders of their creative process, even though Wright, as you described, was clearly procrastinating, but something in him knew he was going to be clutch and make it happen. So.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. I mean, if it was me again, and the guy calls me up and says, I'm going to be up in 2 hours. I'd love to see the designs. There would be a lot of swearing happening as soon as that phone got hung up. Swearing and screaming.
Yeah.
But apparently he just was very calm about it. Okay, guess I better do this. Sat down at his drawing table and just whipped it out.
Yeah.
Whipped it up, just got it done.
One thing I do know about some procrastinators is they have probably put a lot of effort into something in previous times, or the right amount of effort, and received a B, C plus.
Yeah.
And so they're a little bit bruised from that. And so part of them wants to under invest. So later they can say, the reason I didn't do great was because I didn't have enough time.
Right.
And so that they can cancel the critic that way. We are at our halftime.
I mean, they did, just by the way, he did forget to put doors on the house.
It was falling. This water was
literally falling water. Why do you think it got the name? Yeah, it didn't have a roof. Did not have a roof. Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
Have you read all the stuff about Taliesin and the craziness that happened there? Oh, like a handyman set it on fire and attacked people as they were fleeing the burning building.
No.
It's crazy. Frank Lloyd Wright built this remote school for architecture and encouraged the students to be involved in same-sex couples because it kept them from necessitating going into town to meet girls. Stuff that was bohemian slash I don't know, weird. But his wife was having an affair. I forget what it was, but it was just crazy. And that a disgruntled handyman set the place ablaze and waited at the exit with that axe and started swinging at people who were trying to flee the building. And we're at our halftime. So at this point, we want to ask Michael Winfield to implore you to do the things.
Please. Well, first of all, come visit our website. It's been newly redesigned by Jeff. You can
Holy cow.
You can peruse. It's now 100, well, maybe 90. But okay. We've severely cut down the amount of malware that has infected our website and that will infect your website. So if you've
any malware that's on the site is stuff that we put on there.
Yeah,
that's right.
It's no longer through others.
Richard and Michael have been creating amazing SEO images and text and descriptions and things over the years, and this is finally kind of putting that out in a place where it can be showcased. I think it's like the spinning case for the pies.
Jeff found a very easy way to kind of search through like some general terms and discover some of past episodes of things that we've talked about, and it's only going to expand. So please visit the website. Please look around. It doesn't look like it used to. It looks like somebody actually cared about this thing, which is amazing after 6 years. So thank you to Jeff, and thank you to you in advance for visiting and downloading and re-downloading and finding past episodes and all that business. Don't wait.
Don't wait.
Do it now.
Go now. All right, so let's not procrastinate. Let's go into our third. And Michael, what is your third?
My third choice, and I hipped you guys to this a little bit earlier. I sent you guys a text. It is a beloved story from the children's series Frog and Toad, a story called Tomorrow. And if you haven't checked out Frog and Toad, it's kind of a kids' easy reader series by Arnold Iobel. And it's about a frog and a toad who are these two creatures who are best friends. And Toad is kind of more cranky and surly, and Frog is very kind of effervescent in how he deals with things. But the story involves Toad not wanting to get out of bed and just kind of wanting to lie around. And Frog comes to visit, and he's like, Frog, or he says, Toad, your home is a mess. He's like, I'll clean it up tomorrow. He's like, you have dishes in the sink. He's like, I'll take care of it tomorrow. He's like, your clothes are all rumpled on the floor and your plants need watering and everything, your place is a mess. He's like, tomorrow, I'll do it tomorrow. And then he gets all silent all of a sudden. kind of pensive. And then he starts thinking, he's like, what's wrong? What's wrong, Toad? And he's like, I'm thinking about tomorrow and how it's going to be a hard day. And he kind of gets up and he starts cleaning. And he does everything in one day. And then he's like, he just kind of realizes, he comes to this great realization that the work that he puts off tomorrow will still be there. There's still going to be this more work. And he goes back to bed a lot happier and content that he's now has a clean day in front of him, a clear day in front of him. And it's very sweet. And if you haven't read any of the other Frog and Toad stories, they're all very silly and wonderful in this, just these two best friend opposites, polar opposite sort of ways that, I don't know. That was one of the first things I thought of. With
I love it.
Nothing
Nothing like a fable.
Yeah.
And it almost feels like they're unlike something like Animal Farm, where the horses pull wagons and the oxes pull plows and things like that. Frog and Toad, they're just a couple dudes.
Yeah.
Yeah. They don't do frog jobs.
No, I mean, they don't. I don't know if they don't even have jobs. They just go and they get ice cream and bake cookies and pretend to be brave and fly kites and sit around going swimming.
Mm-hmm.
Great stuff.
Yeah, that's an interesting aspect of a way to look at procrastination as is it a deadly sin, sloth, or is it something that we learned about first, probably as young people in fairy tales and things like that? I guess the Three Little Pigs weren't necessarily procrastinators. The ant and the grasshopper, that was something about procrastination, wasn't it? I think.
Well, the grasshopper kind of never wanted to do any work and figured he could fiddle all day until it came to the winter and he was kind of fucked.
Yeah.
And the ants were like, "Yeah, you should have fucking worked, asshole. Your music's nice, but that's not going to help you." I think they ultimately do help him in the end. And then it feels like, well, he just got his way anyway.
Richard,
that just goes back to my being charming bit. Yeah, just be charming.
Yeah.
Eventually it'll be fine.
And then Hopper shows up and then forces all of the bugs to do the work for him. Oh wait, that's A Bug's Life. Sorry, my bad.
I think the counter to the grasshopper is did you ever read Frederick the Mouse? It was a Leo Leone, I think, story.
No.
Well, all the other mice are gathering grass to help shore up their little hole that they live in, or gathering grains to store away. And Frederick is just kind of staring off at the sky and looking at the trees, and they're a little bit miffed at this lazy mouse who's just kind of soaking in the sun and smelling the the flowers. And then when they all tuck away for winter in their little hovel, they ask Frederick what he was up to, and he starts telling stories about the warmth of the sun and the beautiful flowers and the wind, and they all get warmed and entertained by them. I think that's the approach I decided I was going to take to my life. I will not do anything productive.
Just tell stories like that one.
And
now I feel warm.
Yeah,
so it worked.
Good. Mission accomplished. All right, what is your third, Richard?
All right, my third is Hunter S. Thompson.
Oh, wow.
The great gonzo journalist who, it was said, never met a deadline that he couldn't break. Just notorious for having Jan Winner or whoever from Rolling Stone magazine faxing him, telexing him, where the hell is the story? We go to print in 20 minutes. And him with a gun shooting out, most likely shooting the fax machine as soon as the fax comes in to try and stop the message from happening. And then having to scramble and pull together, a 20,000 word article in 20 minutes. That was just the way Hunter S. Thompson rolled. Now, the question is this procrastination or is this just serious drug abuse? Kind of hard to say. Could be a little bit of both. But yeah, I mean, he was definitely somebody who did not take well to deadlines. And that's something that as he got older, it made it harder for him to get writing work, even with later on in life, he was writing for ESPN, and they basically had just pushed him over to the website because on the website you had less deadlines because there was no it can go up whenever it needs to go up, and he was just not reliable to write stuff for like ESPN the magazine because he just couldn't make deadlines.
Hmm.
And that's sort of my example of somebody who, yes, probably if you asked him would have said, I write better when I'm on deadlines. Shit, fuck. Um, but the reality was he just was psychologically incapable of meeting these deadlines, and it wound up hurting his career.
Do you think you ever met a publisher he respected? Like, do you think it was anti-authoritarian?
Yeah, I think there was probably an element of that. I think he probably resented the people who paid his salary,
Yeah,
which is kind of a I guess it's a good position to be in if people keep paying your salary.
yeah,
Once that stops, it kind of becomes more of a problem.
yeah. I realize there's different lead times on different publications. So were he the you know the working on something for the front page of the
Of Rolling Stone or
yeah,
something.
yeah, that's probably not a good idea. But here he's shaping up. He might follow the RNC or like follow different like political things, stuff that happens over 2 month, 3 month kind of thing. But I'm actually kind of fascinated too about the creative process. And for me, there is that time where you put brush to canvas, and I have been tempted to kind of run for it and then um, kind of get it done, and then later on redo it over and over again. So
Right.
is George Lucas procrastinating when he's doing the third digital remaster of his movie, or is he just kind of like, I don't know?
Yeah, I
Well,
mean, Hunter S.
for
Thompson would say that that for him editing. I mean, I think part of it was also if you get something in at the last minute, there's less time for people to edit it.
Yeah.
mm,
So it's kind of a sneaky way to make sure that your words get published the way that you intend them to get
Oh
published
yeah.
instead of getting run through the editorial cycle. And I've actually got a quote from Hunter S. Thompson about him and deadlines. Every deadline was a crisis. No doubt it had something to do with the deep-seated personal defect. Shit. That was my Hunter S. Thompson. Yet again, another one in my rogues gallery of impressions. But every deadline was a crisis. No doubt it had something to do with a deep-seated personality defect, or maybe a kink in whatever blood vessel leads into the pineal gland. On the other hand, it might easily be something as simple and basically perverse as whatever instinct it causes a jackrabbit to wait until the last possible second to dart across the road in front of a speeding car.
Oh wow.
So I think he was definitely aware of the fact that it was a defect on his part. He was just incapable of doing anything about it.
I think he, as literally an adrenaline and like adrenal junkie. Here's a guy who never met a drug he wouldn't do.
Yes.
So the high wire act that was his life is something that it seemed like every to do a triple gainer off the high dive was not enough for him. He had to be loaded and doing it into a pool of sharks.
Yeah. So to turn in an article a week ahead of time would not have given him the same rush as trying to scramble around 5 minutes before they're saying, if you don't get this in 5 minutes, it's not going in this issue.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with
Uh,
you on that.
Winfield, the final one.
well, I'm gonna wrap it up, which something I think Richard has talked to in the past, and I certainly have. It's this podcast is there are times when it's like you say you are kind of waiting sometimes for inspiration to hit when there's a topic that we're coming up with that isn't based on necessarily on research, when sometimes it's like, well, I got to go read about something that I don't know about. It's a good topic, but sometimes there are topics where you're just like, i'm 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 just gonna, well, I can't think about this now. I'll get to it by the time we're recording, and by the time we're recording, I'll have something and it will be, X minutes before we're recording. And it's like, well, that didn't happen. I never. Okay, well, I'll write something down quickly and then I can kind of flub through it. But there are definitely moments when uh, when you're just kind of waiting for inspiration to take over and kind of carry you through when you haven't quite necessarily thought through everything that you could best think through things. And I think this podcast sometimes leads to that for me in my process.
It's an interesting thing because you've probably done this. I know you have a lot of work you've done in your professional life, and then there are things, other endeavors, like you could probably come up with a kickball team in 5 minutes if you needed to, right? Like, how long do you think you could do that? But over 6 years, we've done a lot of these, right? 300 or so.
But I think that's part of it too. I think that there is the procrastination comes in with the self-confidence that we've done so many of these 300 plus at this point, where it's like, okay, I understand what my thought process is. I know that I don't need to spend an hour researching one particular thing to have a particularly good conversation about whatever. It's like, okay, at some point, I'll get to it. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Sunday afternoon, it'll be like, okay, I've got 3 things. Oh, we need 4. Uh-oh. I don't really have a 4th thing. We'll get there, and then
It'll come to me.
sometimes it's just like, okay, this is my thing.
I move for change of venue.
and then honestly, it's those last minute ones that I pray you don't choose as the judge.
Oh shit, really?
And then there's a tremendous guilt that I have. I'm dragging along with me. Like, the thing that I put the least amount of effort into. I hope he does. He picked it. Oh well, sorry, Rich.
What a braggart. I'm so upset whenever I put minimal effort and I still win. Poor me.
Do you know what's funny? I just saw like this weird, obviously Chris Rock is kind of still in the news, but I saw like this weird like supercut of like all the times that he's like insulted someone. Not all the time, but like, just different insults like on comedy shows or whatever. And one, he was on the couch with like Kirsten Stewart. I don't know which one it is.
Kristen
Stewart, and she was talking about how she's like, oh, I feel really guilty about like accepting these roles that people just offer me and I don't have to do any work. And he's sitting next to her and is like, what are you talking about? Give me the role. I'll do anything for no amount of work. I'll just do it. It's no big deal. It was very fun.
All right,
please don't slap me, Richard.
All right. Hey, keep the podcast name out of your fucking mouth. My last choice, Leonardo da Vinci.
Oh.
Not just a code, but also a incredible procrastinator. It took him 13 years or 16 years to complete the Mona Lisa.
That piece of shit.
Yeah.
Huh.
It's just a painting. I mean, it's a good painting, but 16 years? No, I mean, if you think about it, what do we think about when we think about Da Vinci? We think of someone who's always, who is dabbling in so many different things, whether it's painting and artistic work or engineering or architecture or anything, all these different things.
He really should have picked up that bottle of really extra slow drying varnish.
Yes. But I think that for him, the fact that he was interested in so many different things, I'm sure he had ADHD.
Oh.
I feel very confident in that he just seems like the type of person who would get very easily distracted. He'd be working on this painting and then all of a sudden get this idea in his head for, what if there was something called a helicopter? And then would start to work on that for a little bit. And then, I wonder how horses run. Maybe I should start looking into that for a little while. Apparently he only finished the Last Supper after his patron basically threatened him to cut off the funds.
Oh, wow.
The Virgin of the Rocks, that took him 13 years to make. And there's a reason why we have all of these sketches from Da Vinci that are like, these that were, found after he died.
Mm-hmm.
Because he did all this half-assed work and never finished it. That's why. Because he was a procrastinator.
That's funny.
Now, was he?
Was he?
Do you feel like that we have this finish line observation about how things are, and that here's this person who lived this amazingly multifaceted life of genius in so many different categories, and we're just kind of looking at it in terms of which works had the frame. Yeah, or yeah.
So you painted the greatest painting of all time, but what couldn't you have done? Could you have done two of those within the same time?
It's hard to say. I mean, would the Mona Lisa have been the Mona Lisa if he did it over 3 months? I guess, is that what you're saying, Jeff? Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, no, I guess there was a I know he's been canceled, but Garrison Keillor had this spoof of this Mozart song, or writing lyrics to, I think, Eine kleine Nachtmusik or something like that, and the lyric was, Mozart wrote his very last concerto. When he died, his work was through and his bills were all paid. Like, when he dies, your work is over. Like, that is your work, and it's all complete. And it's all complete to the point that it was ever maybe going to be. But if you live in this constant state of inspiration, and you're continually, you've got a new iron in the fire, a new creation happening. Should we hold him accountable for not doing what we? I don't know.
Ron Popeil had a lot of ideas, but he also he finished a lot of products too.
He finished a lot of products. Well, to your point, Da Vinci did take money from people to make them a painting. And
yes,
sculpture, and he didn't. If he didn't do it, but he has the money, then he's not.
He came up. He invented the idea of being a con artist.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, and because he knew he had a fucking helicopter. It's like, see ya.
Yeah.
Don't go after him. He's just gonna fly through the roof. Oh, that's pretty amazing. Can you even imagine being that freaking brilliant and just?
Oh yeah, of course I can.
Silly of me to ask. Okay. This podcast, Michael Winfield, that was your last choice, and probably the one you would be embarrassed if I chose. So I'm going to choose it. That's going up on the Rushmore. This podcast. Mm-hmm. And Frog and Toad is so charming, more so than Hop Gadling and from Sandman. So let's pick Frog and Toad just because it's so damn charming. And I think it would be a lot of fun to for our listeners to think about that Frank Lloyd Wright, Falling Water. Frank Lloyd Wright, Amazing Buildings, and Calendars for Days. Boy, Frank Lloyd Wright calendars are in every household. Yeah, and then let's also do George R. Martin, because come on, dude, if you're within earshot,
wrap it up,
my dude.
You're not making the Mona Lisa.
Yeah, come on, dude.
You're making a fantasy book. Let's speed this up a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, this has been the Mount Rushmore of Procrastination. I'm always Jeff.
I'm Richard.
Oh, I'm Michael.
He did a bit.
He
did a bit.